From Austin Film Festival, this is On Story, a look inside the creative process from today's leading writers, creators, and filmmakers. This week's On Story, co-writers behind Marvel's Captain America: The Winter Soldier and Avengers: Infinity War, Christopher Marcus and Stephen McFeely.
Marvel wouldn't be around if it told the same story over and over again. That's partly why it gets so complicated, because they go left and right, and eventually every 4 years they have to sort of rip the world up again and start it over again.
In this episode, writing partners Christopher Marcus and Stephen McFeely discuss writing in the Marvel Universe.
We wrote Life and Death of Peter Sellers, which was around for a fairly long time before it got made. And Andrew Adamson, who directed Shrek and went on to do Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe and Prince Caspian, had read it, and they had a script, a basic adaptation of the book that was very faithful to the book. It was basically the book in script form, but in the book, all the kids are kind of one kid who wanders around. And it didn't have enough character, didn't have enough tension. And so they needed someone who was good with character, not necessarily someone who knew about talking animals or epic screenwriting. So we got in by being someone who was good at referring to ourselves as one person, which is a little disturbing.
Particularly for our wives.
Being someone's who could do it, who had a particularly unique skill, as opposed to, we need the best blockbuster guys in here. So we got hired on a rewrite on Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe to do effectively a character pass, and proved to not be so bad at the epic giant stuff that you would need to bring in someone else for that, and it kind of rolled from there.
So how did that essentially then get the attention of the Marvel world?
I'm generally proud of this. People tend not to fire us. We sort of keep sticking around, you know. So it was quite a while before they fired us out of Narnia, and it coincided with the strike. So it's 2007, and we're walking the picket line, and they call and say, "Hey, don't come back to Narnia," you know. When the strike was over,
I don't want to come back.
That's right. When the strike was over, you know, now it's time to look for a job, and a number of things in that vein came our way, and we definitely wanted to make a choice as to not continue in, say, YA fantasy, right? Right around then, Iron Man came out and was huge and fun and successful, and Marvel had the confidence then to say, you know what we're going to do? We're going to make a Thor, we're going to make a Captain America period movie, and then we're going to make the Avengers. And at Captain America period movie, Chris and I went, oh, that's up our street. That's pretty interesting. We had sort of in general thought, you know, if anybody ever wanted us to do a superhero movie, we'd pitch, do it in the time it was invented. So the fact that they were willing to do that was fascinating to us, and we chased that movie all throughout 2008, and then finally convinced them.
I think Winter Soldier is my favorite of all the Marvel films, and I think why is because I really didn't look at Captain America as being a superhero in there. I looked at Captain America as being a guy I'd want to know, and a guy I think that's cool, and he really is kind of a human hero. And that's a little different than the world that most of the other Marvel films are living in, sort of generally. I mean, he's a small percentage. And that's a particularly interesting one to hear how you approached that story, because obviously they are all superheroes, you know, and why you know, was that your perspective in particular? Or do you feel like you imbued that character in that script with that more from your side than from necessarily, quote, the Marvel side?
He is this character who you could easily view as a stiff, as, you know, I think people view him from the outside, if they don't know anything about him, as sort of blindly patriotic, which even in the comics, he is very much deliberately not that. There are a few runs in the comics that were fairly inspiring, where he basically, when they had him in the 60s, and the 60s were going on, and they're like, how do we maintain a character dressed as the American flag when the country is in flames? So they turned him around and had him look at the country. And it felt right to do the same, to have him not be in a position of leadership, rah-rah, but to kind of turn around and say, like, okay, this this is the world that this is the job that I was trained for. This is what it looks like now, and it's kind of ugly. And do I want to be part of that?
We gave ourselves permission to give him no arc in the first movie, right? And it wasn't necessarily our first thought. Our first thought was, oh, maybe we need to dirty him up a little bit in the first act. And Marvel said, well, no, that's how that works. He said, you're right. He's Gary Cooper, right? He is correct. He is true. He is brave, etc. And the world changes around him. Same thing in Winter Soldier, by the way, right? But we just gave him a corrupt world that deserved changing. But he himself is steadfast in his belief. Now, we couldn't do that forever. So in Civil War, we wanted to maintain his character, of course, but give him consequences for that steadfastness, right? Because your character's flaw is very often your character's strength, right? So because I am so determined and loyal to the way I look at things and my friends before it means I threaten the very Avengers because I'm going to the mattresses for Bucky, right?
But there is a flashback structure that we have structured 2 movies with, and then taken out. But it was kind of helpful to do it. And effectively, it was flashing back to Captain America's past, giving you information about it, and sort of telling a parallel story. And what it did was remind us, I think, and remind everybody who we were working with, that there was this past that was pretty painful for Steve Rogers, who, if looked at from the outside, is a very handsome fellow who occasionally puts on a ridiculous costume. And, he can be easy to dismiss if you don't remember the fact that he's just basically been through hell for 100 years. And so I think we keep being drawn to this flashback structure to remind you that of everything he's been through, and that there's a lot of sort of weariness to him. So we've tried that a few times. Maybe we'll try it again. I don't know.
You do that. We end up doing it through character, but it's a lesson we have to learn every time. That's the thing. I get so angry at myself that we've been doing this a long time, and we keep going, geez, that's so obvious now. We just spent 6 weeks forgetting a thing we should know. Like, Chris is right. That backstory for Steve, which is painful, can all be summed up in one scene that we finally got to, which is him talking to Peggy Carter, who's 95 years old and forgets who he is. I mean, that's it. That's all you need.
Sometimes the best that we can do is to start over. You're alive. You came back.
From the very first Iron Man movie, again, which we did not work on, they knew that you needed to fall in love with Tony Stark. He is not Iron Man until minute 40 of that movie. He pops out of the cave and lands in the desert and saves himself. But if you notice in that movie, they start off with a little bit of a flashback, and he's in a Humvee, and he's swilling bourbon, and he's talking to a bunch of soldiers, and they are treating him like a celebrity, and he's all the Robert Downey Jr. he can be, and you're just charmed by him.
Is it cool if I take a picture with you?
Yes, it's very cool. I don't want to see this on your MySpace page. Please, no gang signs. No, throw it up, I'm kidding.
It's, hit by an IED, and people that you just met get killed, and he's really scared, and then there's, I think, a hostage video. Then you cut back to 36 hours earlier in Las Vegas, and he's a complete douchebag.
Wow, will you look at that? That's something else. I don't have any of those floating around. We're gonna let it ride.
Give me a hand, will you? Give me something. Okay, you too.
I don't blow on my honey bear. Don't blow on my There it is. Lieutenant Colonel Rhodes rolls in.
And if you had not done that, and you had just followed the douchebag for 15 minutes until he got blown up, you would have been rooting for him to get blown up. Right? Because they're very smart. I need you to like him. Steve. So when we saw that, we said, we need you to love Steve Rogers. Go back to the first Captain America. You need to love Steve Rogers, 97 pounds, before he gets all super handsome. So if you notice, the scenes in both of those movies, there are very specific scenes in the first act that are meant to make you go, I am rooting for this kid, right? His very first scene, Steve Rogers, he's skinny. So think about what it's doing. I say this a lot, that all scenes need to do more than one thing. First, it's giving you a nice sort of VFX reveal, right? Holy crap, I kind of know what Chris Evans looked like, and he doesn't look like that.
We
That's
starved him.
pretty good, right? Burly guy next to him reads about World War II and what's going on, and they're all enlisting, right? They're in their exams, and he goes, "Oh, I'm a little worried about going over there. Are you?" And Steve goes, "Nope." And he stands up and he walks over to the doctor, and the doctor goes,
Rogers. What'd your father die of?
Mustard gas. He was in the 107th Infantry. I was hoping I could be assigned
Your
there.
mother?
She was a nurse in a TB ward. Got hit, couldn't shake it.
Sorry, son.
Look, just give me a chance.
You've been eligible on your asthma alone.
Is there anything you can do?
I'm doing it.
every scene for the first act is, I just want to fight. And you're rooting for him. And so at the end of Act 1, Stanley Tucci gives him his chance. And that's not even the last scene that makes you root for him. I mean, that's the one that goes, oh, he deserved that chance. He gets to be Captain America because he jumps on a grenade, right? Like, but that's the idea is you've got to love this guy before he becomes the superhero.
Yeah.
And Marvel does that throughout.
These are movies about Steve Rogers, about Tony Stark, about Natasha Romanoff, who just happen to have these costumes in the closet. But, you know, if you don't start with the person, you are going to get a very kind of dull-edged movie.
Titan was like most planets. Too many mouths, not enough to go around. And when we faced extinction, I offered a solution.
Genocide.
But random, dispassionate, fair to rich and poor alike. And they called me a madman. And what I predicted came to pass.
This movie made sense when we decided it was Thanos' movie and he was the protagonist and he went through the de facto hero's journey. And then everybody else, he was the hub of the wheel and everyone else was a spoke off of it. And we knew we had two, so we knew it was okay to backseat a few characters. Steve Rogers is a good example, because we knew his story was better in the second movie than the first movie, and we had to give ourselves permission to, it'll all balance out.
And it was really a surprising piece of the film. I mean, it actually, because at first I really felt like, oh, here comes another bad guy, and then it was like, oh my God, this guy's real. This is some good stuff. So you purposefully gave him a heart.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, one, if you have two movies and, you know, if someone is going to be the driver for two movies and they're a cardboard character, it's going to, you're going to get bored very quickly. One, he already had two adopted daughters, which is a pretty strange thing for a villain to have. And that gave him facets. He's all, I mean, I'm just going to say disconnected fragments until it coheres to a whole. He's great in the comics. He is barely a villain in the comics. He's this sort of amoral, semi-psychotic philosopher. And we didn't want to lose that.
Good villains think they're the heroes of the story. But they're not usually the heroes of the story, right? Because they have to lose at the end. We were given an opportunity for a really expensive movie to have the bad guy win at the end and really kind of do a hero's journey. The end of Act 2 isn't, Gamora dies at the end of Act 2. That is sad and the worst thing that can happen, not for the Avengers. It's the worst thing that can happen to Thanos. It was that clean a hero's journey for us.
So working on, a character like Captain America, and then working on another character like Thor, and they already have some personality there, and now you're taking that character and you're driving it in, either further in that direction or diverting a little bit. Like how did you go from taking that script, or from taking that character developed in that first script because Kenneth Branagh had some input on that script too, right?
Undoubtedly, yeah, he directed that.
You're now inheriting it, and you're going in a direction. So how do you approach that?
In Ragnarok, where Taika Waititi really leaned into the comedy of the character. And we did not want to lose that. But we also wanted to acknowledge all of the stuff that had happened to him and all the many people he had lost and the sacrifices that he made. So that I think one of the successes of Infinity War is that Thor arc where he's got a scene with a friggin' raccoon that breaks your heart, and where he's just talks about all the things he's lost, and if fate wills it, he'll get some measure of revenge. We did the same thing with Steve Rogers in the Winter Soldier movie. You take everything away from them, how do they react, right? You put them in this new world. It's a long way of saying you can embrace the comedy, you can embrace the character that came before, but you always want to move them forward to some degree, right? And not wipe the slate clean, treat things seriously.
It feels like, even in a lot of studio films, not Marvel, that you can try to fight for your stuff and then of course get fired. But you maybe have a better chance of fighting for it in a way, just because you're in such a boxed universe here to some extent. And are there ones that you just thought this would be a cool way to go, and they just were like, no f***ing way, McFeely?
Yes, bless you. Yes, we've had certain fetishes that we've wanted, like the Red Skull is in Infinity War, and didn't necessarily have to be in Infinity War, but we helped introduce him in the first Captain America, and felt he was unresolved, and we had an idea for him.
Where is the Soul Stone?
You should know. It extracts a terrible price.
I am prepared.
We all think that at first. We are all wrong.
And he was on the wall for a long time going, do we bother?
People would go, yeah, we'll talk about that.
Yeah, they're just trying to kick that one. Same thing.
I'm telling you, it's cool.
In Winter Soldier, again, I think it may be why you like it the best. It is almost not a comic book movie. It's a political thriller, sort of. And it's very gritty, and it's very, when the Russo brothers came in, they sort of applied a De Palma pastiche to it, right? So that there's you get that elevator scene, and there's a lot of tension before it all goes down. So in many ways, you almost forget you're watching a comic book movie until you get to the midpoint where you have to explain, again, in a thriller, you're being chased, I don't know who's after me, and about the middle, you figure out who's after me, and now you can go on offense, right? And that midpoint scene is a talking computer from the past who tells you that everything you know is a lie, right? So it reminds you, writ large, it's a comic book movie.
Rogers, Stephen, born 1918. Romanov, Natalia Alyanovna, born 1984.
It's some kind of recording.
I am not a recording, Fräulein. I may not be the man I was when the captain took me prisoner in 1945, but I am.
And it's jarring in a way, particularly if you sort of forgot. But people kept all sorts of folks kept taking pot shots at it. Like, are we really look how the movie goes now? Are we really going to grind our gears and remind people it's a comic book movie? And we always thought, yes, you are. You're going to do it the best way you can. But do you have a better way to get this exposition across? Would you like him to find a file? This guy's got there's a relationship here.
Right, it's also, and sometimes you see movies where you can sense this. Let's not be embarrassed that we're making a comic book movie. Let's remember that this comes from a place that gave all of us a certain level of joy at a certain point.
I guess the best thing to do would be to have you all talk about, because you've done a number of Marvel films, and obviously with characters that are all interconnected in various stories. And can you talk about how you have to look at the individual one you're writing in relation to the other films within the world?
In general, Marvel's policy is the one in front of us is the one that gets the attention, and all the ingredients that you can possibly need go in it. Don't save anything. They have confidence in the characters and in their process and in the brains in the room that the next one, if we took something that could have been used in that next movie, but we've already eaten our lunch, to mix all the metaphors, we'll just find another ingredient, right?
Find another lunch.
Yeah. So in general, that's how it works. It was a little different on these last two Avengers movies because two movies would come in between them, and the first movie had a sort of cataclysmic event. And so in that case, we did a lot of, the lines of communication were open between us and the Russo brothers and all the other filmmakers. So we had to check in on Black Panther, Thor Ragnarok, Captain Marvel, Ant-Man and the Wasp,
Guardians 2
to a degree, and in some cases make gentle suggestions about, particularly if movies came in between, it'd be nice if you didn't kill this person, we could use them, right? That kind of stuff.
Or you might want to know that we killed this person, we can't use them.
Right.
You're working on this one now, Infinity War, when Ragnarok is in, where? When are you working on the script when that is actually essentially finished writing? And do you call Stephanie Folsom and say, hey, tell me what you did with this? So
we were actually, I remember sitting in the conference room endlessly talking about what Infinity War could be when someone said, hey, Taika Waititi is in the hallway because we think we're going to do Thor 3. I mean, it was that far down the line. Sometimes there's no one to call. They disturbingly call themselves the Parliament at Marvel, who are the various creative producers of the other franchises, other movies, and they are generally working in the same office and sharing the information while the individual writers and filmmakers are sort of off on location or in their bunker trying to get things done. So we're talking to the producer's talking to the sort of hive mind over there. And there is a lot of checking in, but there's also a lot of looseness, because I think that's very important both to the creative process, but also just to the idea behind Marvel, is that it's not working in lockstep. There's a general sense there's a plan, and that's about all they want. You don't want to contradict each other, but if it feels like you're just laying groundwork for a thing that's coming, if it all just feels like, building blocks, then those building blocks are not going to feel like movies. They'll feel like we're heading toward
advertisements.
A movie. Yeah.
We think of all of these characters and all of these worlds and franchises as places to draw upon, right? I'm going to need, the story lent itself to, we need someone to take the stone out of Vision's head. We need a place to do that. Where's a safe place with a genius? Okay, so let's go to Wakanda.
That movie hadn't come out yet. If there's a chance with any movie that it could tank, we had to go forward with, no, we're taking the whole movie to Wakanda. There's a chance that nobody liked Wakanda, and there would be a moment where they're like, the words come on screen and everyone's like, oh God, it took it.
But are you not seeing these other movies before we are? Are you not reading these scripts?
We are,
before?
but in that case, that movie came out in February and ours came out last week of April.
There's no time. It is like driving a giant cruise ship. You just can't turn it around or stop it. It's just going. So you really better know there's an island pretty far in advance.
We started shooting Infinity War before Black Panther.
Oh, wow.
And finished. They finished. We're still shooting. We're shooting the second Avengers movie. Ant-Man and Wasp are shooting. They finish. We're still shooting. I mean, it's
all on the same lot in Georgia. It was
all in Atlanta.
Wow.
Yeah.
It was very disheartening to see them come and go, and we're still.
Save yourselves.
You've been watching a conversation with Christopher Marcus and Stephen McFeely on Story. On Story is part of a growing number of programs in Austin Film Festival's On Story project, including the On Story PBS series, now streaming online, the On Story radio program, the On Story podcast, and the On Story book series, available where books are sold. To find out more about On Story and Austin Film Festival, visit onstory.tv or austinfilmfestival.com.